An industry that changes as rapidly as digital forensics does demands a careful balance between informed business experience and the technical knowledge needed to pivot when businesses encounter disruptions. With us this week on the Forensic Focus podcast is Bollö, who has worked for nearly 2 decades as Chief Executive Officer of MSAB. I'm your host, Krista Miller, and welcome, Joel.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
It's good to have you. So to start with, you've been with MSAB helming the company for 20 years as of next year, since really the very beginning of not just the company, but mobile forensics as a discipline. What are the key highlights for you from these last 2 decades?
Oh, wow. There's been a lot. I mean, I can say it started with a highlight, actually. We've been, as MSAB, we've been working with cell phones before we do what we do today. And we were contacted by the Swedish police, who had a demand to actually copy SMS and contacts so they could do translation. That was the first demand. So first highlight was actually when we were contacted by them and realized how we could help them, how we could improve their performance. Mm-hmm. Actually where we started. And then there's been several highlights. I mean, this is a fast-moving industry. And as you said, I've been here for close to 20 years now. And we were first out to this industry, and a couple of highlights been for me personally, but also for the company, is when we set up our North American office. I moved over with the family, spent 2 years in the US, and been a success since then. So I'm proud of that. Mm-hmm. But also that we, from beginning, and we start to realize that more and more even now, we're thinking about the integrity. So afterwards, I realized how forward thinking we were when we started to create the secure file format that we actually still have. Of course, that's been developed over time, but we had that secure file format and integrity thinking from day one. And when I look in the mirror, I was like, we were really pioneering that part of it. So, congrats to that one. Yeah.
So how have you seen the market for mobile forensics change in that time? I mean, the 2 decades, what's the same and what's different, both broadly and maybe across different regions of the world?
Oh, wow. Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot that's been changed, but at the same time, there is a lot that is still the same. So if you start to change, I mean, this is probably one of the fastest developing markets I could think of. I mean, when we started to do our first mobile forensic tools, there were no cameras even on the phones. And when camera came, that was sort of a new thing, but the cameras, you can't compare the cameras that was in the first phones that we have today. Mm-hmm. So in that sense, it's been developed a lot in terms of technology. Mm-hmm. That is good. I mean, this was when we started with this, it was more or less a niche market for the forensic labs. They were doing this, and they were happy to do this kind of work just based on what you could get out of it. What has now developed is that, I mean, it's impacting law enforcement globally, this challenge, I would say, with these devices. Mm-hmm. So therefore, it has gone from being sort of a niche market now more into something that impacts the whole law enforcement. I mean, not only for the forensic lab, is how do I deal with these devices from, when I confiscate these devices until all the way up to court and maintain the chain of custody and all that. So it's been a lot of change in that sense, but and also legislation has been changed over time. I mean, what you're able and not been allowed to do with these devices, and what requirements, under what circumstances, I would say, is law enforcement legally have the right to investigate the phone or whatever. And that's developing as we speak as now. What's still the same is that, I mean, these devices is, every person's, maybe most commonly used device today, more than computers, more than anything. So it's also the number one tool for bad guys. And it was a number one tool also for bad guys when we started. So that's the same. And it's a challenge about, getting the data, securing the data. I mean, let's say we call it reveal the evidence. I mean, what's in this device? So that's pretty much the same. And my experience, and this is pretty funny because, I mean, we have offices in, I think, 16 countries now. And the most common thing I hear from my staff, especially when we set up a new country, is that, that our industry, maybe the industry in other country works like this, but in our country is very special because we need this and this. And when someone says that, I know, okay, now it's exactly the same as the rest of the world, because it's about revealing the evidence and relieving the data, securing the evidence, and doing it in a correct manner. But it's been developing, and it's been developing in many times, and you could say that for the reason that these devices has also become so important for us, doing voting, bank services, and it's much more than just a cell phone. Also, the encryption and that part has increased a lot into these devices. Barrier to entry is now much higher than ever, I would say, into this industry.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I actually, you mentioned having offices in 16 different countries. I wondered what the sort of whether the needs for law enforcement in those different countries is generally about the same. It sounds like it is. Are there any significant differences that you've noticed?
Well, are there any significant differences? I mean, no, I would say no. I mean, first of all, we act in what we call we act in democracies. We work with good countries. So those countries, I would say, is mostly the same. There are some variations of what you can do, but not more variations that they are like in between different states in US, for instance. So in that sense. But what we see is that when we started with this industry, they were able to cope with all the phones that they confiscated because there weren't that many phones. In general, we can see now that I can't think of any customer I've been speaking to or heard of in our key markets that has not more phones that I wish they could do than they are capable of doing, actually. So what our customers in general are discussing now globally is, well, how do we adopt this challenge? We realize that this thing will not go away. We just continue to increase both the number of phones, but also the amount of data per phone.
So I guess kind of on that note, again, we've talked about this rapidly moving industry, possibly one of the fastest in the global economy. Talk to us a little bit more about some of those technology challenges. You mentioned encryption and excuse me, some of the other issues that law enforcement is running into. What do you see on the horizon at this point, and for challenges, and how are you adapting to meet those challenges?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, what we see is that the encryption, that part becomes more and more advanced, because I mean, we want this to be safe for us that don't have a purpose to commit, crime or doing bad things for the society. So I think it's important to have a balance between integrity but also security. And when I talk security, I mean, we have the police force to keep the society safe. And I think the challenge, and I don't have the exact answer on this, but that us and our industry, but also legislation makers needs to think of is, how do we balance so we don't get the mass surveillance society, where they say, well, now they're so secure, so we're going to force these the industry to have a backdoor for everyone. I don't want to have that either. So that is something that the society in general need to adopt that challenge, because we see that it's coming up. But that said, we also see that there is ways of combining information so you can reveal evidence from these devices. But I think if I look further on down the line, I think that's a big challenge. But also the big data thing. I mean, even if you can unlock and extract this information, there's no way of being able to walk through a device or several devices manually today. It's simply too much data. So I think also the industry is going to be more and more AI driven. You need to have computers helping you, giving you, I would say they can't do a precise work, but they can suggest maybe this is what you're looking for, this is what you do to filter that out, to keep the efficiency, because it's simply too much data.
Kind of on that note, you touched on legislation a little bit ago. I wanted to talk about the impact of new privacy legislation in the European Union, now also in the United Kingdom, as well as in some US states. How is that kind of legislation affecting customers and in turn product development?
I mean, I think it's with all rights. I think it's good that these legislations comes up because it's about integrity and privacy. You can't do anything just for a small crime because this is very powerful tools as well.
Mhm.
So I think what it does, it shapes up our customers' way of working. They need to find standards of different ways of working. We see now the demand for different types of standards in ISO. There is a
Yep.
initiative called Kate, and there's other initiatives for mobile in Europe. So there are different initiatives dealing with this. So it needs to be set a standard. So from crime scene to court, there needs to be a certain way of doing this. And I think it's good because it will be positive. You will keep, maybe even increase the trust for the police and for the law enforcement.
Mhm.
So it will be, when it's necessary, we can give them or leverage what they need to do the right thing. Because if things are misused unpurposely, I would say, or maybe just misinterpreted, that can hurt the whole industry. So I think it's good that there is an open discussion around this, and I'm proud that MSAB is in the forefront in many ways, initiatives of this standardization and impacts.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about that. You mentioned the For Mobile project in the EU, and I know your company occupies a very unique position in that you're, I think, the sole vendor that's involved in that. So I wanted to find out more about that partnership and how you anticipate For Mobile will shape mobile forensics in terms of that evidentiary quality and integrity and confidence in coming years.
Yeah, I mean, if you look back, why did even this initiative came up from European Union? Well, because it was, I wouldn't call it Wild West, but there were so many different tools and ways of doing this kind of work.
Mhm.
So as this type of evidence become a common evidence in courts, they realized when defense or even juries or prosecutors asked about this, there were so many different variants and they didn't really understand how this evidence was created, or is it done in a forensically safe way?
Mhm.
So what the purpose with the For Mobile initiative was to set the standard for not what tools, but the standard how to secure, I mean, this whole chain of custody. And I think it's been a good, it's the industry, we are the only industry part in this, and there's 19 other parts in this For Mobile project. And it's universities, it's police academies, police forces, and different stakeholders. And the outcome of this will be a suggestion of a standard how to do this, but it's not only about tools and what the tools should do. It's also about how to deal with this, how to train, how to retrain or keep people updated.
Mhm.
And as crimes are more and more moved to the cyber, the police needs to follow that. This is a way of educating the police to follow and to track evidence where evidence is to be found, and that is in cyber. And these are the cell phones that are the key device to be used in cyber. So I think the outcome is that, and we come far in this product already, and I think the outcome will be that other parts of the world are looking into what have European Union, this For Mobile product led to. And we already hear now from European customers, but also elsewhere, that they look into this, and it's not mandated to follow this, but it becomes more and more recommended to follow this.
Mm-hmm.
So we're proud to be not just part of it, we're proud that we have been able to lead several workshops in this project during the last 2 years, and that's been going on right now.
We're hoping to, or I'm hoping to talk with some representatives from For Mobile a little bit later this year. So I'm looking forward to hearing more about that for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we talked a fair amount, or you've talked a fair amount about evidentiary integrity and increasing confidence. And that was another topic of discussion that we had in April with Henrik Tjernberg, who was then MSAB's chairman of the board. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit. Since we had that conversation, Henrik sold his shares to new owners. I wanted to find out more about the new owners, what expectations they have on MSAB and what possibilities or opportunities you see with them now on board.
Oh, that's a big question. It's a great question. First of all, I would like to say Henrik served with the company for 25 years or 26 years, 35 years. Sorry, I started 1985, long before we started what we do now.
Wow.
So Henrik has been a big part of the success of MSAB. So rightfully so, he's retired now. I mean, he's done a great work for MSAB. But also, I'm happy that we were able, or Henrik and I were able to found new good owners. One of the largest owner of the MSAB company now is actually one of the founders of Axis. Axis is a global leader in surveillance cameras. Swedish company that started small and grown to a really big player globally in the surveillance. I think we have a lot to learn from them. They are ahead of us in terms of revenue and staff wise, but they have the exactly same experience being sort of a product company, exporting globally, set up and working in the same type of environment as we do. So that's good. One of our also second largest owner is also one of the founder of Spotify.
Oh,
so he's invested heavily in invested in MSAB. So and we had other strong financially strong owners as well. And the expectations from them, I think they've seen a lot of similarities in businesses that they've been in before or still in, but realize and seen the potential of MSAB. They don't think, and I agree with them, that we have capitalized on actually what we are providing. We have very strong technology. We have very strong customer. We have long-term relationship with the customers, but we haven't capitalized on it as we could. We think we deserve more actually, and they see that this industry, even though we think it's been developed and we've been a long time, it's just in the beginning. This will be a much many times larger industry in the coming 10 years than it is now. Yeah. So I think expectations from their side is growth. They have high expectations on me as a CEO, and I like that. I think it's re-energized myself. It re-energized the company. So we will see a lot of good things coming out and happening, accelerated from MSAB in the coming years here. And they have good experience and financially strong, as I said. So yeah, I think it would just boost MSAB. And there's a lot of things happening in the industry in general, but this is a good timing for us. So I'm proud and happy to have these new owners on board.
And I think, kind of getting started with those kinds of market opportunities, you announced a partnership with Datigo in May, broadening first responders' reach to digital media of all kinds, which really, I think, demonstrates some of that, some of what you're talking about in terms of technology, that computers are not going away, just like mobile devices are not going away. They continue to be as important in criminal investigation. So tell us more, if you could, about how your customers are benefiting from this partnership.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, maybe start with general. I think the industry is general. When we started many years ago with this, there was a very clear distinction between computer forensic, mobile forensic, or whatever it was. Today, these industries, they sort of overlap and blur into each other. We still call our cell phones a cell phone, but is it really a cell phone? We do so much more with these devices. So it's natural that customers also demand that they want to compare information, and it overlaps so much. So they can't have different tools doing different things when they basically overlap already. So partnership like we have with Datigo is a great example. Datigo is a very strong company within computer forensic. So it's a good way to be able to mix information and compare information. Many oftentimes you run into a computer and a cell phone device, and you want to compare and share that data, what's common, what's not common, are they connected to each other? There's a lot of things to that. So that said, I think the customers also, what we see in the industry, that the customers, compared to before, don't want to buy or can't buy 5, 6, or maybe even 10 tools because they have an edge on different things. They want to buy more from fewer vendors because they can't cope. So I think the industry see that happening now, also is in an M&A phase. And I think that is driven both by that the companies grow and these things blur into each other, but also that the customers starts to say, well, you maybe have an edge on certain things, but we can't buy 20 tools because they have an edge on certain things. We need to buy something that have a more broad perspective and maybe good enough even on certain things, but we can we can focus on this vendor. And we see that, especially what we call in frontline, when we sell stuff to the forensic labs, they can have multiple tools, and I think they should have, and they will continue to have that. But when we work, we call frontline solutions like our kiosks or tablets or decentralized extractions. They don't choose different or multiple tools. Same thing with analytical tools. They want to have analytical tools that much fewer than they have in the forensic labs. So I think this will just benefits us, the Tego, and of course the industry in general, our customers in general, I should say.
So we've talked a lot about the changes that have happened over the last 20 years. So based on what we've already seen, what do you predict the forensic market will develop over the next upcoming 20 years?
Wow, that's a good question. Well, first of all, I mean, as I said, I've been here for 20 years, and I was trying to think how old I'm going to be in 20 years. Maybe, I should say, maybe/hopefully, I will be here in another 20 years. That's the borderline. But anyhow, I love what I do. And I think this industry, as I said, even though we think has developed a lot during the past 20 years, it was pretty slow the first 10 years or 12 years, I would say. But it's fastly being changed the last 5-6 years. And basically because it's been a common thing for our customers. This is something that I haven't thought about anything that challenged the law enforcement as much as these devices. And it's going to continue doing that. So I think these devices is still going to be number one. I think it's going to be a whole different way for law enforcement globally of working with digital evidence. Now there's special people working with it. They train for frontline soldiers, frontline users and everything. So I think it's just going to continue to grow. And this is maybe going to be the mobile phones in general is going to be probably the largest tech industry globally in 20 years. And our industry, who will help us create a safer society, will also be increasing a lot. And we need to cope with this. And if I should say something, I think this is going to be so critical that even governments will say, we need to have this industry, locally. We need to depend on local partners, like European might say, we want MSAB, or US needs something. But I think it's going to be like, this is going to be society critical industry. So it's going to be, we're going to have a much major role in society than we have today, in general.
So more like critical infrastructure or something like that is what it sounds like.
I mean, look at this chip industry now. I mean, the world is so dependent on what's happening, who can provide us with these small, easy chips. But Europe now starts to build their own industry and realize that some kind of industry, you need to have it locally. It can't be dependent on others. It's going to be critical for society. And I think in 20 years, this industry will be part of that as well. Very interesting. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see where it goes for sure. Yeah, and we just see opportunities in the terms of so much we can do with this. Yeah. Well, Joel, thank you again for joining us on the Forensic Focus podcast. It's been a pleasure. No, my pleasure. Thank you. Okay. Yeah. Thanks also to our listeners. You'll be able to find this recording and transcription along with more articles, information, and forums at www.forensicfocus.com. Stay safe and well.